and district. Also joining me tonight are our Board of Education President, Ms. Lori Oristano-James, our Director of Communications, Ms. Courtney Bonfante, and our Director of Technology, Ms. Kim Gordon. Now, before we go any further, I do want to advise everyone that this meeting is being recorded so that we can post it at a later date for anyone who is unable to watch it. So the topics that we'll be covering tonight are first and foremost our central tenets around COVID-19 mitigation and prevention. In other words, what were our big ideas that guided our planning for this upcoming year? We'll also talk about what we've learned through our experiences last year and through the summer. We'll discuss the key strategies that we'll be implementing for COVID-19 mitigation and prevention. We'll also be talking about some of our key strategies in terms of our instructional programs. And lastly, but not least, we'll be talking about vaccinations and COVID-19 testing. I'll also touch upon the remarks that were made earlier today by Governor Kathy Hochul. So we are very interested in your questions about our upcoming plan. So I'll put this slide up again towards the end, but if you have questions that you want answered directly tonight, you can enter them in the chat room. Attention, Courtney Bonfante. So when you go to, if you click on chat and you select Courtney Bonfante and you send her your questions, she will be filtering those and she'll be presenting them later on in our program. If you have a more particular question about your child or you think of a question at a later date, you can certainly email your school's principal or me. Now, just a few public service announcements before we get into this. First and foremost, we have many vacancies right now in our district, everything from administrators to teachers to paraprofessionals, support staff, cleaners, drivers, you name it, we're probably hiring for it. And we really need employees going into this upcoming school year, in particular substitutes, either paraprofessional substitutes, office staff substitutes, or teaching substitutes. If you go to our homepage, or if you send this information to anyone who might be interested, go to our homepage at www.monticelloschools.net and click on the employment link, or you could go to this bit.ly hyperlink that I've created that has a shortened URL link to it. We also need your help, community members, staff members, students, anyone who is watching this tonight. First and foremost, to reinforce expectations. We will be talking about what our expectations are for students and staff as they enter school for this upcoming school year. It would be helpful for everyone if we're reminded of those periodically. Secondly, if you or your child, if you're a staff member or you're a parent and your child is sick, has symptoms, they should stay home and seek medical attention. Those symptoms, again, are a fever of 100 degrees or greater, coughing, congestion, nasal congestion, vomiting, nausea, any of those general COVID-19 symptoms, please keep your child home and seek medical attention because they will not be allowed to enter school, or if they do enter school, you'll probably be getting a phone call telling you to come pick your child up from school. And that would also put others in the school potentially at risk if your child indeed tests positive for COVID-19. And our main goal this year is to keep our schools open for as many days to in-person instruction as possible. So that is our key central tenet of this plan and of our upcoming school year, to keep our schools open for every healthy student every day for in-person instruction. We based our plans on guidance from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the New York State Education Department, and Sullivan County Public Health Services, and all of them have this as the #1 priority for our kids, that they receive daily in-person instruction. Secondly, the other central tenet that guided our planning process is that with layered prevention strategies, schools have not been transmission zones for COVID-19. And what I mean by that is last year, public schools found that in most cases, they were not places where COVID-19 was transmitted from student to student, student to staff, staff to student, et cetera. And what I mean by that is, in particular, at Sullivan County, within Sullivan County Public Schools last year, there were approximately 3,729 identified contacts of COVID-19 positive cases in Sullivan County's public schools. In other words, there was a positive COVID-19 case, and there were students or staff members who were identified as direct contacts of those, and they went onto quarantine. Of those 3,729 identified contacts, 33 of them later tested positive, or a rate of less than 1%. Of those 33 contacts, only 3.9% of them later developed symptoms. So overall, those who did develop symptoms represented less than 0.5% of the original 3,729 contacts. Our source on that is Sullivan County Public Health Services in a letter that Nancy McGraw sent to superintendents on August 12th, 2021. And this has been found to be true nationally as well, but we've certainly seen it at the local level last year. The other thing that we sadly learned last year is that the lack of traditional in-person instruction contributed to significant learning loss in academics in 2020-21. And I want to stress academics here because we do recognize that many of us learned many things last year. We learned resilience, we learned perseverance, we learned how to operate in virtual or remote settings, we learned how to practice safe hand hygiene, wear face coverings effectively, what quarantine means, when we should stay home, and so forth. But when it comes to the traditional work of schools, which is to teach students core academic subjects, core academic skills, particularly in literacy and math, there was a significant loss of academic learning last year. The Northwest Evaluation Association, or NWA, as some of you may know them, issued a report in July where they analyzed national NWA data for all schools and students who took their tests last year. And what they found was that during the 2021 school year, let me just move this, forgive me. Students made gains during the 2021 school year at a lower rate compared to pre-pandemic trends, especially between winter and spring. Students ended the year with lower achievement compared to a typical year, with larger declines relative to historical trends in math by 8 to 12 percentile points, then in reading 3 to 6 percentile points. Achievement was lower for all student groups in 2020-21. However, American Indian and Alaska Native, Black, and Latinx students, as well as students in high poverty schools, were disproportionately impacted, particularly in the elementary grades we studied. So that's what NWA found out nationally. When we looked at our local data, just need to move this on. We recognized some significant losses as well. So first, let's have some context and take a look back at the 2018-2019 school year, which was the last full year of uninterrupted in-person instruction. So what you see in front of you is a student growth summary report that we get from NWA. It shows the students who took our tests in grades K through 8 in all Monticello schools, and also who took their tests both in the fall of the school year and the spring. So the data set that you see in front of you are the 1,859 kindergarten through 8th grade Monticello CSD students who took both a fall NWA and a spring NWA in the 18-19 school year. Now, if you want to jump straight to the bar chart below the data table, you'll see that there are orange diamonds. Those orange diamonds represent the expected grade level average growth for our kindergarten students, first grade students, second grade students, and so on. So in the 2018-19 school year, on average, our kindergarten students should have made 18 points of growth. But in 18-19, our kindergarten cohort didn't meet that mark. They had 16 points of growth instead. So the blue columns that you see there, those are actual Monticello CSD student results. So if they met or surpassed that orange diamond, That means they met or surpassed, on average, the growth targets for those grade levels. Now, if you want to dive deeper into the data, I highlighted a couple data pieces in here for you. The first one is the School Conditional Growth Index. If that orange diamond met or if the blue column met that orange diamond, that would represent 0.0 conditional growth index. So average conditional growth index is 0. Anything above 0 is above average growth. Anything below 0 is below average growth. So you see that there were 5 grade levels that were just below average conditional growth, and there were 4 grade levels that were above conditional growth. So that's okay. We'd like it to be better, but it's fairly close to the average. If you look at the other column I highlighted, which is the percent of students who met their growth targets. So those of you who track your students' NWA data know that when they get a fall report, there is a spring growth target attached to that report, whether that be in reading or math. NWA sets their norms, so nationally, approximately 50% of all students meet their growth target. So they renorm that from time to time. If you look at our students' results in 18-19, most of the grades were at or above 50% of students meeting their growth projection. Again, not too bad. There could be room for improvement, but it's slightly above average. Now, when we look at the results from the 2020-21 school year, we noticed quite a few concerning things. First and foremost, about 250 fewer students took the tests than they did 2 years ago. What we also notice, if your eyes immediately go to that chart at the bottom of the page, you see in almost every grade level, our student performance was well below the anticipated growth for that grade. So these numbers are very concerning because what you see here in graphic form is that students have not kept pace with what they historically have been expected to in regards to reading in grades, at least grades K through 6, and then at grades 7 and 8, it starts to normalize a bit. If you look at again, the columns I highlighted, the School Conditional Growth Index, you see that there is no grade that is above 0. In other words, no grade is above the Conditional Growth Index, though 8th grade is at a negative 0.02. So that's close. But if you look at the early grades, those are some alarming results that indicate a real lack of growth in literacy. And then if you look at the percent of students who met their growth targets, that too is below normal, where we see 37%, 33%, et cetera, not meeting their growth projection. There are similar results in math. I don't have those here tonight, but we looked at our math results and there are similar trends there. So there's a real academic need to restore in-person instruction 5 days a week. There's also some social emotional learning needs that aren't really represented by data, but we have every indication out there that tell us that students need to reconnect with other students. They need to reconnect with educators, with schools, have a sense of community. And the way that we do that is by keeping our schools open for 5 days a week of in-person instruction. So how do we plan on going about doing that? Well, first and foremost, we want to make sure that our safety and security, our measures, mitigation, prevention are giving us things that will keep COVID-19 transmission out of our schools. The first bullet there is that face coverings will be required of all students and staff at all times while inside Monticello Central School District schools or on Monticello Central School District buses, regardless of vaccination status. Earlier today, Governor Kathy Hochul announced that she will be expediting that face covering mandates in all public schools. So we have that in our plan, but we also anticipate that the New York State Department of Health will be making that mandatory as well. We are also requiring physical distancing of 3 feet or more within our schools. So what that means is while students are in classrooms, in most classrooms, they will be at a distance of at least 3 feet or more and masked, unless they're eating. And if they're in musical performance classes or physical education, that distance will be at 6 feet or more. But again, they will be masked for physical education. They won't be masked for musical performance while they're performing. We'll also be continuing with our daily cleaning and disinfection protocols. We've installed air purifier units in every classroom that needed one, and we've also upgraded our ventilation units as best we can in every classroom. We are also plan on using federal relief monies to install more ventilation units. However, that work will be done throughout the school year and into next summer. But for the time being, any classroom that does not have an up-to-date ventilation unit, that's been provided. We've installed an air filtration unit there. We'll also be requiring students and staff to take daily temperature screenings. We did that last year, and we did detect symptomatic individuals who we promptly either released to their parents or sent home. In some cases, those resulted in positive COVID-19. In other cases, they did not. But we are continuing with that. And we're also coordinating closely with Sullivan County Public Health Services. I've already had 2 meetings with Nancy McGraw over the past month. My colleagues and I around the county plan on continuing those meetings throughout the school year for as long as community transmission rates continue to increase at the rate that they are. Now, we devised these mitigation and prevention protocols based on the U.S. Center for Disease Control's guidance that can be found online for K-12 schools, and also the recommendations of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the New York State Education Department, and Sullivan County Public Health Services. We also based these on what we found to be effective last year at mitigating and preventing the spread of COVID-19 in our schools. Now, with the new governor, we are expecting the Department of Health to take a more active role in issuing statewide mandates for public schools. And whatever those are, we will respond to accordingly and institute them as soon as possible. However, in late July, the New York State Department of Health announced that it was not going to be doing that. So it was left upon us as individual school districts to develop our own plans. I will tell you that most districts in the county are doing very similar things and keeping their plans very close to what the U.S. Centers for Disease Control are recommending. So in regards to our academic and extracurricular programs, again, as I mentioned before, we will be having in-person everyday instruction for every student. We are not planning on remote instruction as an option for students. It would, however, be considered if an individual student has a significant health need that would result in a 504 accommodation. In other words, that the student has some particular health issue that would put them at a significant health risk if they were to be exposed to COVID-19. So in order to do that, a parent would need to provide medical documentation to the school principal to initiate that process. So if you do have a child who does have significant and documented and diagnosed health issues, do reach out to your school's principal for information on that. However, remote instruction in general is not being offered as an option as it was last year. We also plan on reducing class sizes at the elementary and middle school level to address some of the learning loss needs that I highlighted earlier. We've also hired additional intervention teachers to provide early literacy and math interventions. At the high school level, we did have more students fail courses last year, because of all of the interrupted schooling that we had. In order to meet their needs and also continue our rich variety of course offerings for high school students, we're expanding staff there. So we will be continuing the course catalog as it's been known up through this past year, which includes advanced placement, Syracuse University, and SUNY Sullivan courses, as well as other elective offerings for our students. At the same time, having additional courses for credit recovery for those students who need it. In all of our schools, we've hired additional counselors to expand social and emotional learning supports for all students. We are expanding the Ruler social emotional program up through grades K through 8, and we'll begin piloting that as well in high school classrooms this year. You can Google that online. It's a fairly common social emotional learning strategy or intervention. It's Yale's Ruler, R-U-L-E-R. And most recently, as recent as yesterday, we've resumed our athletic programs. Yesterday, our junior varsity and varsity programs began for the fall season. We'll be continuing those throughout the year for as long as we believe that we can safely do so. Extracurricular events, as well as before and school activities, and we plan on starting these in the beginning of the school year. So it's really a resumption as school as you would have known it in the fall of 2019, if you recall back that far. Now, just a word on those activities. Again, face coverings are required at all times in these events while inside school. So for athletic events, while they're outside, face coverings are optional, but for any athletic activities inside, they are being required. That includes both our athletes as well as any visitors in attendance. So now a brief word on COVID-19 vaccinations and testing. I know that this is a hot question for everyone. I've received a number of questions over the past 24 hours. We had some questions at our last board meeting on August 5th about this. I do want to put out first and foremost a reminder about upcoming COVID-19 vaccination clinics that are being run by Sullivan County Public Health Services. They are free. They are every Wednesday from 2 to 6 p.m. at Sullivan County Public Health Services offices at 50 Community Lane in Liberty. If you go to their website, if you go to Sullivan County's government's website and go to Public Health Services link there, you can sign up for them there. At this time, as we sit tonight at 7:25 on August 24th, 2021, we do not have plans for mandatory COVID-19 testing or vaccinations of students and staff. However, I do encourage all of you to at least review news stories on what the new governor announced today, and that is she is planning to require some type of vaccination, mandatory vaccination for individuals, I'm guessing 16 and over, but I don't know that. It was really a little bit scant on details, or the possible option of mandatory testing should individuals not be able to receive a vaccination. Now, I am paraphrasing mightily there based on what I thought I heard the governor say, but you are certainly welcome to go see her speech online at YouTube or read any news reports of that. The short of it is the Monticello Central School District will be following whatever directives come from the New York State Department of Health on vaccination or COVID-19 testing requirements in schools for students or staff. So we have no plans currently. The only plan is to follow what may be forthcoming from the New York State Department of Health and reminding individuals of these free vaccination clinics that Sullivan County Public Health runs weekly. You can also check with your local pharmacy who have, usually have vaccinations on hand, and you just reach out to them and contact them and they can schedule you as well. I got mine, for example, at a local pharmacy. So with that, I want to thank you for supporting our kids, our schools, and our community. I wish you the best in 21-22. And now I want to ask Ms. Bonfante, who hopefully has been monitoring the questions, who will be reading them to me. Now, for the interest of time, she is not going to be asking the same question repeatedly, so do listen intently when I answer the questions that are asked, because if you ask the same question later on, we might not be revisiting it. So, Ms. Bonfante.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please be sure that you are sending any questions to my name, Courtney Bonfanti, in the chat room. Dr. Evans is not able to see any questions that are directed to him, so please be sure that they're coming to me so that I can make sure that we get some answers for you. So Dr. Evans, I can't read the full question because it contains personal information about students. There were actually two questions about this, but can you speak a little bit what option does a parent have if their child does not have a medical condition but does not feel safe sending their child to school in light of the number of COVID cases we have? What options would a parent in that situation have?
Well, they would be the same options that parents had prior to the pandemic. And that is that, first and foremost, we would like kids to attend our schools. We think that we offer a rich variety of academic programs for them that will meet their needs at any level. We also, as I mentioned before, are taking a number of mitigation and prevention strategies that have previously been shown to be effective. We believe that they will continue to be effective at preventing the transmission of COVID-19 in schools. I would also ask that, do stay tuned for potential COVID-19 vaccination and or testing requirements that the New York State Department of Health puts out. And always, as I mentioned before, the same options that existed pre-pandemic for a child's education are still there, which is public school, private school, or homeschool.
Okay, next up, do you have the number of quarantined individuals against the number of those who actually tested positive?
Well, the only numbers that I have are what I showed earlier for schools. So I don't have, countywide data if they weren't related to schools. That can probably be found on, well, I don't know if that can even be found online in terms of the number of quarantined individuals. The numbers that I shared earlier were from a letter that Nancy McGraw sent to all school superintendents. And that number again was last year in all Sullivan County public schools, 3,729 individuals were quarantined as close contacts of confirmed COVID-19 positive cases who were in school. Of those 3,729 quarantines, only 33 of them later tested positive, and then only 4% of those 33 actually became symptomatic. So that I can speak to fluently at the moment. However, in terms of the number overall, that would have to be found online.
Okay. Regarding temperature screenings, will this happen before the students get on the bus in the morning?
No, it will happen the same way. And the reason it'll happen the same way it did last year, which is as they enter the school. We do encourage parents, though, to check their students in the morning to see if they are running a fever. But the reason we do that is to try to, keep our bus routes on time so our schools can open on time. If we were to do that at every stop, it would, we'd be starting to pick kids up at, I don't know, before 5 in the morning in order to make that happen. So that's why, we did explore that option early on last year. However, it quickly became evident that we would not be able to get kids to school in a timely fashion to do that.
And while we're on the subject of the bus, can you speak a little bit? We had several questions, various questions about what our plans are to keep students safe on while they're in our care on the transportation.
So they will be wearing face coverings at all times on transportation. Windows will be open at all times on transportation. However, we will try to maintain 3 feet of distancing in as much as we can. But there probably will be runs where students will be sitting next to each other during the run.
Okay, with distancing in place, will book bags be allowed to, will they be able to carry their book bags around throughout the day?
I would, if that individual could please send, I don't know the answer to that. I would defer to the principals on that. I don't believe that we've changed anything relative to book bags. So if book bags were allowed last year, then they'll be allowed this year. If they weren't allowed last year, then they won't be allowed this year. But that's a better question for your school's particular principal about book bag provisions. But nothing come across my desk relative to book bags.
Can you speak a little bit to the before and after school program? Are we going to have it? And I've specifically been asked about the before and school. In addition to the elementary program, I've been asked about the pre-K program as well as a middle school program for before and after school care.
Okay, at this time, I'm quite confident in what I've heard from Ms. Dana Taylor that at the elementary schools, those programs will be up and running in September. I can't speak to the middle school or the pre-K program, but Dana Taylor can. So if you email Dana Taylor, it's Taylor, Taylor, at k12mcsd.net. She'll be able to answer that, but I do know that the before and after school programs for our elementary schools are currently, the plans are in place for them to start in September. We are, however, still seeking additional staff to do that. So right now, our numbers are going to be limited in those programs until we can hire additional staff for those programs.
Okay. I appreciate everyone's patience. The questions are just flying in. Dr. Evans, we are getting some questions that are very school specific. Before I start going through each and every one of them, would it be best for those parents who have questions about a specific school to reach out directly to the principal of that school?
Yeah, they can. I mean, if it's not, related to what I presented tonight, it's probably best to send it straight to the principal. But if you think that I might be able to answer, I'd be happy to give it a try.
Okay. Okay, well, will the middle school students be with the same students all day, and will they be switching classes or periods?
My understanding is at the middle school and high school level that they will be switching classes and periods. However, at the middle school, they are going to try to cohort when possible. But at the high school, they certainly will be switching periods and classes. I think that you'll see some of that switch at the middle school, but it might not be as frequent as the high school. But that's a better question for Ms. Knowlton.
Okay. Has the district made any decisions regarding accelerating instruction?
I would have to know more about what they mean by accelerating instruction.
Okay, so if that person could send another message with some additional clarification so that we can see if we can get that answered for you.
Mm-hmm.
When we speak about reducing the class sizes, do we have an exact number of students, student teacher ratio in mind?
It varies at different levels. There's not an exact number in mind at the moment, other than it's fewer than what previous years have been.
Okay.
And it varies from grade to grade depending on enrollment too.
Okay. If a child is quarantined, will they be able to learn via remote learning?
Yes, that's a very good question. So if a child is on quarantine, our plans currently are to have teachers, put their expected work in the learning management system, Microsoft Teams, for example, and that the student would be able to retrieve that work there. We are, however, exploring other options that could make learning more synchronous and possibly live streamed. However, we've just begun discussions with our staff about doing that. But, we hope to get to that stage. But as of today, I can give you a firm commitment to, yes, they will be able to access that through their learning management software.
Okay. We've had this question asked at pretty much every building, so I'm just going to give the universal, where are the students going to eat lunch?
So that'll be in the cafeteria in most schools. Some of the elementary schools, though, might be doing it in the classrooms. But I'm quite certain that at the middle school and the high school, those lunches will be in the cafeterias. And at the elementary schools, they're trying to do them in the cafeteria, but there might be instances where they keep them in their classrooms for lunch.
Okay. Touching again back to remote learning, if there's an outbreak, what is our plan?
Well, our plan is to keep close contact with Sullivan County Public Health Services to monitor community transmission rates. And we've had those discussions with Sullivan County Public Health, and we will take their guidance as to whether schools can or should remain open. Now, obviously, if Sullivan County Public Health says, you really need to shut down school and go remote, we will heed that and follow it. In which case, there would be remote schedules that would be shared at the school level between the schools and families as to how that would be done. So I guess remote instruction could happen in those instances. However, it's not a general, open option for parents to opt into like we had last year.
Okay. I am just going to touch back to that question about accelerated learning because the individual reached back out and I want to make sure that I don't lose it. So to clarify, accelerating instruction relates to strategies that we use to help students catch up since last year's learning loss will accompany the new work covered this year.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. So yes, our curriculum directors over the summer have been working with teachers and teacher leaders to develop what we call bridge curricula. So that was to identify areas last year that didn't get the full time or instruction that they deserved, and then or other gaps that students presented at the end of the year, let's say through NWA assessments, and then those are being woven into this year's curricula to help bridge those gaps with the intention of, by the end of June 2022, students are back on track to where they should have been for that particular grade level. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, thank you very much. So Dr. Evans, you made pretty clear that as of right now, the masks are required for all students. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions regarding masks. Number one, is there any way that that could change at some point during the school year, or are you fairly certain they'll be in masks all year long?
Well, we follow whatever recommendations are put out by public health agencies, which include the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the Sullivan County Public Health Services, and it looks like that New York State Department of Health will be getting back into the action very soon. So if they come out and say that it's safe to scale back face coverings to, let's say, vaccinated, unvaccinated individuals only, or face coverings are completely optional, we'll review it at that time. We'll discuss it with Sullivan County Public Health. We'll discuss it at the board level and then take any actions that we think are needed. These plans, what I've shared with you tonight, are plans, I'll say, at least for September. They absolutely are subject to change, as anything is. And if we learned anything from last year, we have to be prepared to turn on a dime when it comes to addressing, large numbers of individuals who might be going on quarantine or having high community transmission rates. And then we have to make those adjustments pretty quickly. So it can be changed. It's not set in stone. Nothing is. However, at this time, with all of our public health agencies saying that masks should be worn in schools by everyone at all times, that's what we're following.
Okay, we also, on the subject of masks, we have quite a few parents who are asking, and I know you did touch on this earlier in your presentation about students who either will refuse to wear a mask or who might not be wearing the mask properly. In other words, they might have it below their nose. What is the district's plan to ensure that students are wearing face coverings and wearing them appropriately?
So obviously there's an educational component to that, where much like hand hygiene, staff will be instructing kids on how to wear masks properly. So if a student is wearing it under their nose, then our staff will be asking them politely to adjust it properly so it's up above their nose. If it comes to, outright refusal to wear face covering, when a staff member directs the student to wear their mask, then that may be considered an act of insubordination and may be referred to administration for potential counseling or discipline. So, again, this goes back to reiterating expectations. The expectations are, when students, staff, or visitors are in our schools, that they're wearing masks appropriately. And if they don't have a mask, then we will be providing them with masks.
Thank you. So how will the nurses' room be used? Is there going to be any chance of a student who's displaying symptoms of COVID being in the same space as a student who might be ill but not displaying COVID symptoms? What's our plans there?
Sure. So that's an excellent question. So last year, in each of our schools, we created isolation rooms, if you will, where students who were symptomatic and might have COVID-19, they were isolated in a separate room that the nurse checked in on them with, and we were able to get a parent to release them. And then there's the regular kind of nurses room, where students who might need to get regular medication, for example, would go to, or students who would have other health concerns that were not symptoms of COVID-19, they would go there. So yeah, they're kept separate.
Okay, have our plans, what have we done to take into account the more contagious strains of COVID-19 as well as, what we're seeing in the South with the mass spreading within the Southern schools? Can you speak a little bit to how the district has looked at that information?
Well, relative to the spread of it in the South, if you read into, the data around, let's say, mask mandates in schools, which aren't happening in many areas in the South, or mask mandates in general. If you look at vaccination rates in some of the states in the South, they are not on par with what they are locally. I believe in Sullivan County, just over half of all eligible adults have been fully vaccinated. So what studies have shown is that there is a correlation, there's a relationship between rates of vaccination and hospitalizations around COVID-19. So what we think is happening is that those areas where those high levels of mitigation strategies are not in place, you are seeing significant community spread. We'd like to encourage more vaccinations for all individuals who are able to get them. And again, we're taking these mitigation strategies very seriously and are requiring social distancing and face coverings in schools.
Okay. What reason did the district choose to not have a vaccine mandate for all staff members?
Well, one, the district can't prescribe that without having negotiated it with its respective employee unions. So yesterday, about 24 hours ago, the FDA finally approved the Pfizer vaccine for all individuals aged 16 and above. So once that came out, New York City then put into effect its vaccination mandate for all teachers and principals, I believe before the end of September. I have been considering that over the past 24 hours and had some initial discussions with some leadership in the district. However, right now, given the governor's announcement, our plan is to wait and see what the governor puts out or the New York State Department of Health puts out, and then follow that. It is a difficult decision that weighs heavily on me. It weighs heavily on other leaders in this district about that level of requirement of staff members or, let's say, eligible students. So right now, the plan is to follow the New York State Department of Health's lead.
Will the pickup and drop off procedures and times be the same as they were last year? The procedure and the bell schedule?
The procedures, yes. The bell schedules, there might be some slight modifications at the middle school and high school. I would strongly recommend that the parent contact their respective schools with that question. I know that our principals this week are sending home, if they haven't already, the annual summer mailings that has a bunch of information in it, but those questions are probably best addressed through the schools.
Okay. Will the students in elementary schools go to other rooms for specials, gym, and lunch recess, or will they be in the classroom similar to how they were last year?
So that's going to be school specific based on room utilization. So there might be instances where specials are held in specials rooms, for example, like physical education happening in a gymnasium and art happening in an art room. But there might be other situations where, depending on room utilization in a particular school, the music teacher, for example, might go to the classroom, or the art teacher, for example, or the librarian might go to the classroom, depending on the school's particular needs. But in as much as possible, we are trying to have them in separate standalone rooms and in their regular rooms.
Okay. If a teacher, I'm going to rephrase this because a lot of these questions are sort of getting at the same thing. Can you just tell us what the quarantine process is going to look like specifically? Under what circumstances will we close school in the event of a quarantine? I'll start with that, and then I'll just ask a couple of more questions on behalf of our listeners.
So last year, in almost every non-weather related case where we closed school or switched to remote instruction, it was because we had too many staff members of a particular school or across schools who were going out on quarantine, and we could not effectively supervise the schools. Now, we know that a number of our staff members have since been vaccinated. We don't know exactly how many. It is my understanding that vaccinated staff members, as we sit currently, might not be required to be quarantined. I also believe that Sullivan County Public Health Services has revised its quarantine protocols. They revised them initially last spring. They've since revised them based on the U.S. Centers for Disease Control's recommendations, where if individuals, if students are, my understanding, and this could be subject to change based on the situation, my understanding is that if students are at least 3 feet apart or more and wearing masks, that they would not be considered close contacts of COVID-19 cases, and they would not be subject to quarantine. We are reviewing Sullivan County Public Health's quarantine requirements, and we will communicate that at a later date to staff and families.
Okay, and I apologize. Sorry, go ahead.
That's my understanding as we sit currently.
Okay, and you may have answered this in the last 30 seconds. I apologize. I'm just going back and forth with the questions. What will happen if will siblings and parents, if they work in the school of a positive COVID case, will they be required to quarantine?
Well, if a sibling of a quarantined student,
A sibling of a student who is tested positive, and or his or her parent, if the parent works at the school, will they be able?
if they live with a COVID-19 individual, then yes, because they would in essence be quarantined, right? That because they're in a household. My understanding is that they're in a household with a COVID-19 case. In all likelihood, they would screen out of our questionnaire, firstly, and we are continuing the questionnaire this year. And secondly, I believe the Sullivan County Public Health Services would quarantine them as family members.
Do we have any information about assessments for this year? Regents, NWEA, anything like that? Do we know what the plans are in that respect?
So NWA is a local decision, and we plan on continuing with them because they do provide us with very accurate data on students' early literacy and math skills. And that's going to be critical for us, for our teachers to adjust their instruction to meet the needs of our students. So I would strongly encourage parents to encourage their students in grades kindergarten through 8 to go in the fall and do their best on NWA, so our teachers know specifically what the needs are for our students in literacy and math. So the NWAs are a local decision. We will be doing those at least in the fall and the spring. In terms of the New York State 3 through 8 testing and the Regents exams, I have no information on that at this time, other than no information to me would indicate that they plan to continue to use those. Right now the plan is that they will be in place in June. There is a Regents exam schedule that's out that we've worked into our schedule for the year. So right now the plan, I'm assuming that they will be required again next spring.
If there's a student who has a health condition and is, allowed to receive remote instruction because of that health condition, will their siblings also be allowed to be remote to protect the individual that has that health condition?
It's all subject to the American for Disabilities Act or 504 accommodations. So if those individuals made a request for special accommodations, they would be heard by Pupil Personnel Services and reviewed. So I really will defer that to them, because every accommodation that's made is particular to the individual who has the condition. My understanding of 504 accommodations is it's for the individual who is, who has the specific condition.
Okay. Is the district going to require weekly or periodical COVID testing of students? And if so, will this be done at the school?
So again, not at this time. However, we are anticipating some type of announcement from the New York State Department of Health on COVID-19 testing of students and or staff. We've also been told by Sullivan County Public Health Services that they are exploring methods for COVID-19 testing of students or staff, and they are monitoring community transmission rates. And should community transmission rates get to a point where they think that testing would be required, then they will communicate that with schools, and we will certainly communicate that with our community.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit to mask breaks? When, where, and how often will students have mask breaks?
So there's really no particular schedule other than they will be done periodically. Previously, we left that to kind of teacher discretion because every school is a little bit different in their schedules. Mask breaks will be outdoors. We will be taking kids outside. So the wintertime, we ask that they, if we're still having required face coverings in the winter, that students dress appropriately. When students eat, certainly their masks will be off during that time. So that would be considered a mask break as well, but that would be inside.
Okay. For students who might be suffering from anxiety issues after this year, will we have counselors available? And if so, how can parents access those supports in advance of the school year?
Well, I would strongly encourage any parent who believes that their child is suffering, from anxiety to seek mental health support outside of the school. There are professional agencies out there. There's Sullivan County Mental Health Services as well. So I would start with that if it's serious anxiety, and then from that diagnosis, then I would recommend that the parent communicate that with either the principal or the guidance counselor in the school, so that our staff are made aware of it and can take necessary steps. Parents certainly are encouraged to communicate with our teachers and staff if there are particular needs that they think they need to be aware of regarding students. However, we're limited in terms of being able to properly diagnose. We don't do that. We're not licensed mental health professionals who can offer diagnoses. We leave that to the specialists. So if there is serious anxiety that requires, significant counseling and or medication, do seek professional help outside of the school.
Okay. Can you explain the reasoning behind having this meeting tonight online versus an in-person meeting?
Well, one, we're able to, address particular needs of families who might not want to come out for fear of having, large numbers of people gathered in a relatively small space, even if it is the auditorium. Secondly, we can record this and we can post this recording online for people who aren't able to attend, and they can revisit this to see what our plans entail and these questions are being asked.
Okay. When or if a snow day is called or any other situation where we may have to physically close school, will the students receive remote learning on those days?
So that's an excellent question. Right now, our plan is we have 8 allotted snow days for the upcoming year. Our plan is to use those as traditional school is closed snow days first. If we get to a point where we use all of those snow days, or we start getting to a point where we might, be using all those snow days, we will consider either switching to remote instruction on additional weather-related closures or taking back days off spring break, which has been the norm pre-pandemic. However, the ability to offer some level of remote instruction would, our understanding, would meet state ed's requirement for a day of attendance. So we are considering that option as well. But, for the first 8 weather-related emergencies, they will be snow days, full closures for students and staff.
Okay, I'm just going through to see if there are any that I missed. I do want to remind everybody that this is being recorded. Quite a few questions that I'm seeing come through are repeats or comments. I can assure you that all comments are going to be shared with Dr. Evans at the close of this meeting. I do see one that I missed. Will students be issued devices again this year for in-class homework and possible remote instruction?
Yes, absolutely. And the parent should contact their child's school for more information on that. That's being dealt with at the school level, but the answer is yes.
Okay. So you spoke a little bit about the reasoning why we didn't have it in the auditorium. What's the difference between having a large number of people in the auditorium and having students in classrooms in terms of safety?
Well, we're able to accomplish this in this setting. I think I showed earlier what the effects of remote instruction or interrupted instruction are. And our priority as a school district is to instruct students. So instructing students with a teacher in a classroom, I would like to believe is far more important than what's being discussed tonight. And what's being discussed tonight can be shared tonight and recorded, whereas what teachers bring to their classrooms for kids cannot be easily recorded and then just watched over again for replication. So there's quite a significant difference there.
Okay. Are iPads being used in the elementary level, or will they have traditional school supplies? And also along that vein, will the kids carry their iPads with them every day?
I believe that my understanding is that iPads will be provided and used at the elementary level. In terms of supplies and how those, the management of iPads by individual students, that's really a school specific question. And I would ask the parent to contact their school's principal for that.
Again, I am just looking through to see if there's anything that we haven't covered. I want to reiterate, this is going to be available for parents to watch. Quite a few of these were already answered. Here's a good one. Can you speak a little bit to what students should expect the first week of school? Are they going to get any sort of orientation and or guidance regarding what we discussed tonight with mitigation measures?
Yeah, so our schools are planning, kind of brief introductions on what the expectations are for face coverings, for social, when they get to their classrooms. The classrooms will be clearly marked for social distancing, and teachers and administrators will be reviewing those expectations with students, especially students who are new to a school. So, like Cook students who are going into Rutherford, incoming kindergartners, middle school students who are going into the high school, for example, Rutherford and Chase students who are going into St. John Street as new sixth graders. So they'll be given a little bit more attention by their teachers and staff. But yes, these will all be reviewed with students in the first few days of school.
Okay, and when will school sports start?
Well, varsity and junior varsity fall sports started yesterday. So that's volleyball, soccer, cross country, and football. So if your child is interested, is a high school athlete and is interested in those sports, to contact Mr. Budenhagen or go to our website and click on athletics, and you can find the sign up protocols there. For modified athletics, those are grades 7 and 8. They typically start the first day of school. So first practices, my understanding, will be Wednesday, September 8th. Again, same protocol for registration. If you go to our website and click on athletics, you will be able to see the sign up process for students there.
Okay. If parents have any additional questions that have not been answered tonight, or if they feel that they haven't gotten the answer they're looking for, what are their options?
Well, I think most of these questions we've seen are really school specific and are questions that can be answered at the school level through administration. So I would, defer to principals and assistant principals for their advisement there. So I would start at the school level. If it's a larger district question, like a lot of these were excellent questions on, are we going to snow days? Are we switching to remote? or what's the district plan for mandatory COVID-19 testing or mandatory COVID vaccinations? Those are certainly, questions for me, and I think I've answered those. But, particular questions about, again, how are iPads to be used by elementary students? That's really best answered at the school level. So in any situation, what our standard protocol is with parents who have questions, the first question is usually, well, did you talk to your child's teacher? If you did you talk to your child's school administrator? And if you did you talk to, then ask me or our other district administration, and we'll address it then.
Okay, well, in that case, that is all that I have for this evening.
Thank you, Ms.
Dr. Evans, if I could just take a half a moment, I'd just like to thank both you and Ms. Bonfante for doing the work that you did tonight on this presentation. Things are going to change on a dime as they have in the past, and we're just going to remain on top of it. But the key to what you were just saying is that communication piece. So communicate. We'll answer the questions as best we can. Some of the directions, as Dr. Evans has shared, we're waiting for information that will be coming, or we believe will be forthcoming based upon what we heard today through the new governor and what it is that she's delivering and asking for from the Department of Health for school districts. So we will keep everybody informed. Again, Ms. Bonfante does an amazing job at getting information out between Facebook and web pages, and our building principals utilizing the robocalls. I know those are not the most favorite thing. Trust me, the school board members receive them as well. We know when you're getting one, we understand, but it's a way for us to get information out. And I do want to just thank everybody for attending today. And again, keep those questions coming. We're happy to answer them and do our best to make sure that you are as informed as we can possibly get you in these formats. So again, Dr. Evans, thank you. And Ms. Bonfante, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Orstano James. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoy these remaining days of summer, and we're looking forward to a exciting new school year. Again, students' first day of classes is Wednesday, September 8th. We're looking forward to it. Stay well, everyone.